I can't get over being a staff director. I'm very sorry.
Thanks for getting recognized from the witness and the sitting-in senator. Looks like I'm the last senator standing. We've had a lot of interesting discussions about the health of our federal government and our financial trajectory. I got a question for you, because a lot of the facts and figures, I think, have already been covered by other senators. Do you think a balanced budget amendment or statute would be helpful to keep both sides of the aisle in a place where they'd have to do that simple thing so that we don't borrow from our kids and grandkids? I know everybody has great ideas and intentions, but it looks like the major result over the last, probably since the Bush administration, when we put 2 wars on the credit card, it's been both sides of the aisle. And that goes back to 2000. We're entering into 3 decades of it soon. Where are you at on a balanced budget amendment or statute?
Senator, one, you're always thoughtful about these things, and I thank you for the way you approach them. I know we have a lot of disagreements, but I know you are honest about your ideas. My concern about that type of amendment is what it would do to programs like Social Security and Medicare. I do believe it is going to take bipartisan solutions. I know Senator Romney talked about a commission. Look, our concerns are always going to lie in what will dramatic cuts do to the benefits of programs. You know, I think about my 95-year-old grandmother.
Okay.
If we did that, what happens? What is her source of income, of stability? If we pull back dramatically in that fashion on Social Security and Medicare, that is my concern.
What about the crowding out effect of more and more interest year after year, even to do that? And do you think that we'll ever get to a point where, I know in the president's budget, that's assuming that that stuff can get done, that it doesn't tamper with economic growth that I think was set in place back, you know, with some of the stuff done in 2017, which you'd probably disagree with. But isn't there a point where, I think it's called the modern monetary theory, where deficits and cumulative debt just don't make any difference anymore? Do you believe that?
Senator, I believe we need to make sure debt and deficits as a percentage of GDP don't make our debt unsustainable. So no, I do think there are measures we have to be very careful about. We need to make sure real net interest stays well below, as a share of GDP, 2%. Our deficits in the long run are about 4.5% of GDP. Most economists believe those levels make our debt manageable. So we agree on the need to manage our fiscal house. But we think nominal numbers tell one story. Yeah. The more complex story is looking at a lot of these things as a share of GDP.
I think the only other country that's taken that more to the limit would be Japan, and they're a country that's got a lot of issues with their economy in terms of how it's growing. So in going 50 years back, we've never, other than 2 years, generated in revenues, regardless of the tax rate. You raise taxes, you flush a little more into the Treasury, you start to lose economic growth over time, as a rule. And if you lower taxes, you take a little bit away from the Treasury, you raise economic growth over time. Pre-COVID, the CBO was about ready to say that we were revenue neutral on the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And then, of course, all the wheels fell off associated with COVID. So at some point, we got to not defy statistics to keep Social Security healthy, Medicare, Medicaid, defend our country. Maybe we have to do fewer things, but anymore, the mandatory spending is getting to the point where it's driving everything structurally. So it sounds like you're willing to live with never reducing principal, keep growing debt as long as the percentage of interest doesn't swamp the deck.
Look, I think the way to measure these things from a sustainable standpoint is look at real net interest as a percent of GDP and look at deficit as a share of GDP. I don't think it is saying our principal should never be paid down. But I also am a believer revenues is a story to tell in this. I do believe, especially with the IRS investments we have, that there is a different story we should be telling this country about bringing revenues in. And the last time we had surplus in 2001, we did have revenue higher as a percentage of GDP.
A couple years out of the last 50. So I just want to make sure you don't try to generalize that, because that's been hard to attain. The other thing I'd like to point out is that with the economy as it's been constructed over the last 3 years, I'd make the contention that government has benefited most. The only part of our economy that actually brings prices down, enables you to raise wages, would be from more business investment. Government is another form of consumption, and we're already a consumer-driven economy based upon, I think, borrowing and spending as opposed to investing and saving. We're not going to, I'm about out of time here, even though I'm the last senator. We're not going to get to any agreement there. I would just want to put it on record. I think we're headed in a direction that we've never been there before in the history of our country. I would cite coming out of World War II, where the last time we had government as a percentage of GDP where it's at now. And we're not in a war. And we were savers and investors there. We paid it off to where we almost had no debt, built the interstate highway system. A lot of what you want to do through government, I don't think is going to be sustainable when we don't put more discipline into the configuration. So I think a lot of the things you talked about are in jeopardy, because we just cannot, over time, when the facts and figures say we've never generated more than 17.5% to 18% of our GDP in federal revenues, having a federal government now that's taking government to up to 25% higher than what it was pre-COVID, and we're not involved in a war. Think about that. I think we need to pay more attention to it, or else I think the country in the long run is going to be going through some really tough times, living beyond our means. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Senator Braun. You're no longer the last senator.